My friends, remember this barn from last week? Foam bricks, balsa wood, 3D printed roof tiles? No? Okay, it doesn't matter. It was a fun time building it, so let's now crank it up to 11 and give it some paint. Primer is your good friend, because it unifies all these different materials such as plaster, wood, foam, metal, resin, and it provides a solid foundation for paints. Black primer is gonna be even more helpful because we'll be able to achieve more contrast in form of fake shadows and some subtle color variations. Base coat was done completely using a set of rust paints from Life Color. I started with an orange-brown tone which I sprayed in a cloudy pattern over the entire barn, roof included. Then I quickly distinguished some tiles using different tones such as this orange rust. And also this yellowish rust. Also this desaturated sandy rust. Sort of. Even a pinkish rust tone. Those tiles are large, so airbrushing is a pretty good way to give them some variation. However, I did the same thing on the walls, and while it doesn't look like terrible, it can be done in a better way, which we'll take a look at in a few moments. And boom! One evening session summed up in less than 2 minutes. Next I covered the entire building with 2 layers of chipping fluid, because our airbrushing escapades are about to continue. I thought, hey, why not try airbrushing the mortar lines as well? And while the idea isn't terrible at all, I think it would work better if the gaps between bricks were slightly deeper. The chipping fluid allows us to remove the paint, and this can lead to some gnarly results which are right up my alley. But I wasn't entirely satisfied with the result, and thus I decided to refine it with a paintbrush, using the same light grey mixture of Tamiya paints, lacquer thinner included and all of that. And while I had the paintbrush in my hand, I thought, why not paint every brick individually? Because, like I said, the variation wasn't very good and the airbrushed approach was rather soft and diffused. And on top of that, I went for a walk around my village in search of some good references, and boy did I find some hidden treasures. Living in Eastern Europe has some benefits after all, I guess. So this was pretty much the result of a sudden burst of real-life inspiration. I used some of the Life Color paints and on top of that some extra orange tones from Vallejo. But what really made a huge difference were the skin colors. So don't be shy to use some of those if you're gonna paint your own miniature brick wall or a building. Going back to the roof, which is still covered with chipping fluid, I sprayed a random light coat of deck tan over it. This will be a nice subtle layer of discoloration with some texture. So technically we can consider it as dirt as well, I think. The reference photo, like the OG photo that I'm using for the entire shape of this house, shows a different colored roof over the shed. Those tiles could be made from cement, or they're just faded differently and maybe they came from another building when the shed was built additionally or whatever, I don't know. It's just nice to have it like this. Okay, so far it looks pretty good, although it looks like a Barbie house, if Barbie lived in Eastern Europe. So let's play around with some acrylic washes, filters, glazes, you name it. This is a very quick way to add more variation and weathering because there's no drying time compared to oil paints or enamels, and if the paint is diluted enough, we can still keep the previously applied texture visible, which is quite important. Applying such a wash needs more care when you're working on the walls because we don't want to darken them too much. Just a basic layout, so to say, for grime and deep shadows. Mortar is rarely applied in a perfect way like this, and yeah, it was my mistake making it overly neat, but this way we can make it look more gnarly. The black wooden parts were probably itching a lot of you, but don't worry, we're gonna take care of them now. So here the black primer plays in our favor because we can achieve a very nice effect with just one cloudy layer of a grayish tan color. I'm not the biggest fan of masking, so I sprayed it all freehand. This is just a base coat though, and here I already played around with some wet blended acrylics. So let's take a look at the process. I used a wide range of colors ranging from white to black, and the selection and amount of each paint depends largely on the result you want to achieve, so it's good to have a reference picture in front of you at all times. I had a couple of photos with a very greyish faded wood with some orange-brown accents, and my process was something like this. I'll show it to you first on one plank, okay? So, an overall heavy wash of deck tan. Then, an equally heavy wash of light mud applied right over the wet paint, hence the wet blending. Then some white, although this might seem unnatural at first, but it really plays a huge role in the process. Next we can add some additional warmer tones here and there with old wood, and this time it's better to leave the paint to dry because we don't really want light and dark colors mixing together too much. So a very diluted wash of pure black will suddenly bring out the wood grain texture and also tone the colors down a notch. Burnt umber is a dark brown color with a very slight touch of green, which is excellent for this decaying effect. And German camouflage black-brown is overall just awesome shadow color, which can be used to outline any details and visually separate planks from one another. Blending acrylics like this isn't too difficult if you're working swiftly, so don't be afraid. And after all, any imperfections are more than welcome on this type of surface. The final paint is flat earth. I even used a more orange color on other planks, and this type of effect is often seen on wooden barns. I don't have a PhD in wood physics, but to me it looks like when the wood is shielded from the elements, it doesn't fade and instead it retains its vividness. Even a simple protruding plank is enough to create this effect. Finally, we can add some additional tones if needed, and that's about it. The rest is easier to achieve with oil paints or enamels, which we'll get to in a few moments. Obviously, it's easier and more efficient to do it on multiple planks at a time, ideally in some large sections like half of the barn doors, for example. This whole segment took me 30 minutes to finish, but seeing it as a time-lapse gives me hope that one day I'll be able to pull it off in 20. Anyway, like I said, it's best to have a reference photo in front of you because there's way too much variation in faded wood, but the overall process was the same everywhere. Going back to the roof, I painted the vent at the top with a very dark, almost black, rusty color, because heavily corroded metal is often boring like this. But there's a more interesting thing: lichen. I tried replicating it with a mixture of deck tan and a few drops of green, again sprayed over a layer of chipping fluid. The result isn't too convenient. I think the shape of tiles doesn't do it many favors. It would probably work better on flat ones, but I'll make it look more natural with oil paints. And because we already dabbled into lichen, let's give moss a shot. I bought this crushed foam some time ago and it's finally time to try it out. The idea also comes from the original reference photo. The shack roof is completely covered under a thick moss carpet. I didn't want to go this heavy, I kinda want to have a little bit of everything on this house, and thus the process isn't too complicated. Working in small sections, I just applied a few drops of diluted PVA glue, focusing it mostly into crevices, but sometimes also on the more exposed parts in form of these tiny droplets. And then I just sprinkled the foam over it. Then we just get rid of the excess and continue to our heart's content. While the foam is pre-colored and it looks pretty nice, it looks more natural when it's painted. It's mostly about how you're able to blend it with the roof. You know, it's not gonna look so glued on. Moss can have all sorts of colors ranging from vivid greens to dark browns, and again, references for everything. I personally went with a rather dull, ugly color, but the khaki drab works nicely with the green. It looks properly rotten, doesn't it? It has rural decay written all over it. I can't even pronounce it properly. Anyway, now we can put acrylic paints aside and play around with oil paints. Now, thing about oil paints is that you should drain them from oil on a piece of cardboard, and I like to leave them like this overnight. As such, I don't often know how many paints I'm gonna need, so I prepare a few extra. I pretty much used all of these except dust colors and green. So to be more specific, it was black, sepia, industrial earth, shadow brown, dark mud, dark rust, light rust, oxide patina, neutral gray and faded white. Whew, that was a mouthful. Anyway, starting with the roof again, because the process was very straightforward here. Just like with acrylics, I find it better to start with light tones and work your way towards the darker ones. Also, even though I'm using neutral gray right now, you'll notice it's not really neutral, or gray in fact. It's more of a dusty color which kinda looks like lichen. So that's pretty cool. Next, oxide patina, which I added in very limited amounts. And finally, shadow brown for some of those dark, grimy, moldy stains. The final touch was adding a heavy pin wash with sepia between every single tile. This can be varied for some additional grime stains, and it can also improve the thick moss by giving it a fake outline shadow of sorts. That's as far as I went on the roof. I think it looks pretty okay as it is, so let's now take a look at the walls, which I've already finished on the barn for comparison. The process is probably even more straightforward than on the roof, and the first layer is faded white, which we apply in random amounts and blend it into soft streaking effects. I applied it in just a few locations, not as an overall filter, because I think the resulting contrast is gonna be more gnarly this way. Then we can proceed with industrial earth. This is gonna give us a nice decaying look because of its grayish green color. It's a sort of pin wash and a filter at the same time, so I'm applying it very diluted, otherwise it would darken the surface too much. The final, darkest color is shadow brown, which we can use as a pin wash and to outline various features such as door frames, but I also focused it around lower portions and shadowed parts where moisture could accumulate over time, and also into those deeper gaps between bricks. Most of the time you'll see deep shadows and grime accumulations between them, and perfect, neat mortar lines are not very common, so this is a nice way to achieve that look. Wooden parts were pretty much the same thing, except here I also applied rusty oil paints over hinges on locks, but other than that it was again industrial earth and shadow brown, which I mainly used to bring out the wood grain texture. The only enamel paint used on this project is slimy grime because of its top-notch color. It works perfectly on wooden parts, but it can be also used on bricks and roof tiles. But it's better to apply less and add more later than adding too much and not being able to remove it. Let's now finish those windows. I actually had this broken glass kit in my stash for a few years, thinking I'd never use it because, tanks and all of that. But it came in super handy now. It's basically a very thin glass, but you're also getting all the tools required to cut it to shape, including this steel pen thingy. 3M tape is also included, which will prevent it from shattering all over your workbench. There are more tools for adding cracks, but I simply whacked it a few times with a paintbrush, and it was glued to the window with diluted PVA glue. My initial plan was to use clear plastic foil, which is the standard procedures in dioramas, but this small detail looks just that one bit better. Weathering was carried out with acrylics, however these blend horribly on clear glass, so I had to give them a little nudge with lacquer thinner. And of course, a few pin washes with oil paints will finish the job. It's a lot about messing around with several layers because glass is very smooth and doesn't accept paints, at all. But after a while you can end up with something subtle like this. You wouldn't even tell there's styrofoam right behind it. Anyway, that's gonna be it, my friends. I don't know if there's anything more I could add, and when that feeling hits you, it's the best time to stop and call it a day. I hope you enjoyed this video because I sure did. It's something completely different than my tanks. I know, but it's incredible how much fun you can have with a simple brick house. I personally love brick buildings, and overall this rural architecture is just my thing. And working with foam and especially painting it, it's just amazing, my friends. If you were hesitant like me, don't waste any more time and try it out yourself. As someone who never did any scale buildings in his life, I'm totally sold and I'll do another one in the next project, but let's not get too far ahead. We still need to assemble this house with the tank and most importantly the groundwork. In other words, we have all the elements ready, now we just need to put them into the diorama. So I hope you will join me for that the next week, and until then I hope you enjoyed watching, and if you did, leave me a like or a dislike if you didn't. And thank you so much, I appreciate your support a lot, my friends. My friends. I also want to thank these handsome humans who are my official Patreon supporters. There's actually a lot going on my Patreon, and if you decide to join me there, you'll get tons of rewards such as frequent, almost daily updates from all my projects, 1 week early ad-free videos. So yeah, you could watch the diorama video right now, and also DMs, real-life reference pictures taken by yours truly, 3D files for printing, in case of this house it's the roof which I printed, and also these super nice studio photos which you can download in full resolution. Anyway, that's really all I have for you this week, so until the next one, stay safe, stay awesome, and please keep building models because that stash of yours is not gonna build itself. Cheers!